Hello and welcome. My name is Leo Sofa and I'm an intuitive storyteller. And in this video, I'm going to be going into the theme of surrender to the stillness. Then I'm going to be telling an intuitive story based on that theme. And then there'll be some time at the end to wrap things up. I think will be about 45 minutes. So what does that even mean? Surrender to the stillness. Well, anyone who engages in a dedicated spiritual practice finds that after some time, a space inside of love and presence and vitality and stillness starts to open up. Any effective spiritual practice will take you there in a short time or a long time. It doesn't matter. But the experience of being in that place of abundant love has quite a profound effect on the rest of your life. You see, I spend most of my time trying to work out how to get more love. It's my deepest felt longing in life to be loved, to give love to others, to be a vessel of divine love. These are my most keenly felt longings. And all my life, my mind has been very busy trying to work out how this can happen. So with spiritual practice, there's the experience of being in a place of love, just being present. It doesn't need a plan. It doesn't need a strategy. It doesn't require anything of you. It's just present. And then back into life, back into daily life, and the mind's persuasive idea that it can get you to a place where there'll be the love you want, where the conditions will be just right, where the love you're looking for will be allowed to flow. Increasingly, in my experience, this starts to become questionable. I get skeptical. Is this big old plan really going to help me? And this is where surrender comes in. Surrender is actually a sensible strategy. It's an inevitable strategy as spiritual practice deepens. Because you start to recognize that the mind and all its plans don't actually ever lead to the fulfillment that you seek. Because the more time you're spending engaging with the plan, it means you're not present. And present is the only place where love can be. It's the only place where you can experience that love. So back and forth into spiritual practice and out into daily life. And the plans start to fall apart and to fray. That's where I asked for a story. This is what I do with my intuitive storytelling practice. I come to learning edges in my life. I come to places where I have a feeling something really juicy is just about to reveal itself, or there's something, but I can't quite touch it. I take those kind of learning edges, those deep questions, to my inner storyteller. This is something I've been doing for almost 25 years. I ask my inner storyteller for a story to help me understand this better. It's also a story that I can share with other people. It has a dual purpose. And the story that comes is utterly unknown to me. I have no idea what's coming next. It arrives as a series of images and words, and my job is just to follow along. In that area, I've learned to surrender quite well, that one area. So the story that came was one that I liked, and that's the story that I'm going to tell you now. I've got my guitar here to start us off. Once upon a time, there was a shoemaker. And one morning, early in the morning, urgently, this shoemaker, he goes to the baker's shop. The baker who's always up earlier than everybody else, who's so devoted to his work that you can almost guarantee it. You could almost set your watch by him. He's there every morning at the same time, hours before everybody else, making the bread. And the shoemaker, who's really quite in a mess, he's really quite desperate. He's been running all the way down the street as if he just had an idea, and the depths of desperation is now acting on it before he loses his courage. He's running down the street and he arrives at the bakery and he's all out of breath, and the baker has never seen anything like it. People don't usually show up at this stage of the baking process. There's just dough and flour everywhere. He says, "What can I do for you?" The shoemaker, when he catches his breath, he says, "I've got to ask you something." The baker, he says, "Well, I'm busy, can't you see?" "Yes, I know, but it's very important," says the shoemaker. You're the only person I think can properly help me. I'm desperate." "All right," says the baker, and he pauses in his work. He says, "What is it that you need?" The shoemaker, he says, "I'm in a terrible quandary. It's a terrible quandary, and probably you won't even believe me." "Go on," says the baker. "I'm sure I will." "Well," says the shoemaker, "a few weeks ago, a commission arrived on my bench, on the workbench in my workshop. I don't know who left it because I wasn't even there. I came in the room and there it was." "What was it?" said the baker, curious now. "It was a bag of gold coins and a note," says the shoemaker. "Oh," says the baker, "sounds like a commission." "Yes," says the shoemaker, "but that's where the trouble started." "Why?" says the baker. "Because as soon as I opened up the note and read what was inside, my heart sank. I thought someone must be playing a joke on me, but the money that was there was enough to buy all the materials." "What's wrong with that?" said the baker. "What's wrong," said the shoemaker, "these shoes are big enough for a giant. They're big enough for a giant. They're enormous. I don't know where I'd get the leather from, but the money that's there, it's just what I'd need." "Sounds like a good commission," says the baker, who's already beginning to laugh about this. "Yes, but don't you understand?" says the shoemaker. "I don't normally work like this. I get a commission, I turn it round in a couple of days, and then I just kick back and take a rest, wait for the next commission to come in. I never get much work, and I can get by on the little that I do have. But this, I just know, I know instinctively. If I'm to finish this job, I've got to be like you." "Like me?" says the baker. What do you mean?" "You," says the shoemaker, "you have mastered the art of devotion." "Devotion," says the baker. "Yes, look at you. You're always here at the same time. You are there every single day. I need to learn that from you. There's no other way I can do this." The baker had become pensive. He was watching the shoemaker. He said, "Look, I'm very busy now, but I do have something for you. Come back. When I'm finished, come back at midday and I'll tell you what I've got." "Okay," said the shoemaker. "You won't forget." "I'm sure you'll remind me," said the baker. And with that, off ran the shoemaker. What else could he do? He went back to his workshop and he sat at his bench And he just gazed like he had been gazing for weeks and weeks at that bag of coins, at that unfathomable commission. I am so up to my neck, he told himself. When the time came, he ran back to the bakery, and there was the baker just finishing up. "Oh, there you are," he said. "Oh, I won't be long now." And he's dusting his apron off, and he's unwrapping it, taking off, and he's going into the kitchen. "Come with me." And there's a pot of tea, and he puts 2 cups on the table, and he says, "Right then." And he starts pouring the tea for our friend the shoemaker, and he says, "When I heard your story this morning, I realized there's something I need to tell you." "Tell me?" said the shoemaker. "Yes," says the baker. "I need to tell you a story." "A story?" said the shoemaker. "But what kind of a story?" "Well, it's a story that I think will explain where you're at and will help you get where it is you want to go." And with that, why, the baker, he just started to speak. He started to speak a story, and as it began, why, the shoemaker just listened. Once upon a time, there was a village. And in this village, the water ran dry. It just ran dry. No one could get water anymore because it came from a spring way up in the mountains, and it was delivered all the way down the mountain by means of a pipe that would arrive in the village. And everybody used it for drinking and for cooking and for washing. It was indispensable. For as long as anybody could remember, the water had flowed without fail. Now, however, it stopped, and nobody knew why. It just stopped, and nobody knew why. People started running around and saying, "What's happened?" And they would go up to the spring where the water came from, and they'd examine it, but it was just dry. And it was impossible to see what had gone wrong, what had happened underneath that in the earth. Nobody knew. And so people are getting thirsty. They're going down to the river that's 2 hours walk away, downhill, and 2 hours walk back up, carrying all your water. And it's impossible, and they can't possibly carry on like this, but they must. They must drink, and they must cook, and they must wash their children and themselves. What can they do? Well, this goes on for a few days, and it's pandemonium. Everybody's exhausted. Everybody's stressed out. It's impossible. What are we supposed to do? It's then that they decide to hold a council of elders. All the wisest and most trusted people in the village, they're gathered together, and they all give their opinion. Truth is, however, that nobody really knows. Old and wise though they might be, nobody has a clue what to do. Goes round the circle, and nobody really has a decent idea until at the very, very end. At the very, very end, why, it comes to this wizened old lady who doesn't even live in the village. She lives halfway up the mountain, but everybody knows her. And although they're a bit suspicious, or at least a bit scared of her, she was invited by someone who thought she might be helpful. And when she comes to speak, she blows them all out of the water with her clarity. She blows them out of the water with her clarity. She says, I know what's wrong with the water. I know why it's not flowing. Everybody leans forward. Everybody wants to know. We must, all of us, go up the mountain and sing. Sing? Sing for the water. If we sing, all of us, all together, it will flow again. No question. Well, under normal circumstances, this would be treated like most other things that people had heard her say, which is like a lot of eyebrow raising, a lot of skepticism. But these are not normal times. These are desperate times. So the entire village, they troop up the mountain. They all troop up the mountain. They arrive up there at the spring that's now just a dry place. And the old woman, she gathers them all around the spring. And she teaches them a simple chant. And they all learn it and they all start to sing it. And it goes on for hours. Hours. Nothing. No water, no nothing, no change, just a lot of singing. And mother's saying, I got to take my baby back. I can't stay here all night. Workmen saying, oh, I've got to go. I'm sorry, I got work tomorrow. And everybody, one by one, they're all just trooping down the mountain until there's just one person left who stayed behind to join the old woman. And that's the young lad. And she stops singing and she turns to him and she says, at least one has stayed. Why? Well, he then explains that he's always felt strangely akin to the mountain. He'd rather live up there if he could, but it's too cold in the winter and he doesn't know how to survive, but he would if he could. He feels more at home up in the mountain than he does in the village. And always he'd been drawn to the spring. He never knew why. He just always wanted to sit there. He always felt great when he was sitting next to the spring. She says, you're the one then. We'll sleep now and we'll wake up early tomorrow and we'll sing all day. He was happy for that. And she found some places where they could sleep and be warm enough. And in the morning, she took him to some places where they could forage for food. And they chanted all day long. And it went on and on and on. And her chants, they modulated and changed from one thing to the other. And he had a good ear and he followed her everywhere it went. And at the end of the day, they sat there. They talked a little bit more. They got to know each other a bit more. And then they slept. And then they woke up the next day and they carried on. It just went like this, day after day after day. Meanwhile, down in the village, there's still pandemonium. People are still panicking and not knowing what to do. And there's one or two people, after a few days of this, they say, well, should we just go and see if the old woman's still up to that weird stuff she was doing, singing those strange songs? Should we just go and check? I mean, we haven't got any other ideas. So they did. They walked up the mountain and they came upon them, and even just approaching them, they can feel the sacredness of what's going on up there. It's kind of amazing what's happening. They're just sitting up there, the two of them, and it's almost like they've gone into some kind of altered state, like a trance, singing and singing to the water. And the two people that had come up the mountain, they stay. They just can't leave. It's not possible to leave. They just stay. And then more people come. As more and more time goes by, more and more people come, and some of them come down and say, there's a whole crowd of them up there now. You got to come up. And then slowly but surely, the entire village comes back up. The entire village, and they're all there now. And now things have dropped down to such a level of sacredness and devotion. You can feel it in the air. It's palpable. The singing has taken on a life of its own. Everybody's singing. And then when the very last person has arrived, the old woman suddenly raises her hands and she says, "Stop!" And everybody stops. And then there's this tiny silvery voice that's so faint that only a few people can hear it. The old woman hears it and the young man hears it and a few of the children hear it. And the voice says very, very quietly, "Please don't stop. Please don't stop singing. I love it when you sing. Why have you stopped?" The woman, she says, "Why have you stopped flowing, oh water?" The water replies, "Because the people of this place do not appreciate what I have been giving. They drink water and never appreciate the subtle qualities that I bring. And I've had enough. I won't go on anymore. I can't flow like this and not have those subtle qualities received. If they won't receive them, then they will go thirsty." The old woman, she said, "Oh, water, tell us what it is we can do. Tell us what it is we can do such that you might flow again." The water then said, "If you really wish to receive my gifts, I want you to give thanks for not just the gifts that you are aware of, but the blessings of which you are unaware. Can you do that?" Old woman, she looked around the circle of the entire village. She said, "Can you do that? Can we all do that?" And they all as one voice said, "Yes, we can. Yes, we promise, we will." And in that moment, why, the water, it started to gurgle as if flowing from deep, deep down in the mountain. And then whoosh, in a flood, it came rushing out and soon was filling up that little catchment and flowing down the pipe that led all the way to the village. And the people, they rushed down and they were cheering and they got to the village and at last they could drink. At last they could wash themselves properly. Everybody was so happy, but they did not forget. Every drink they took, they remembered to be grateful for the water, for the cool water, for the way it slaked their thirst, for the way it sustained them, but also they made it a prayer of gratitude for all the blessings they were receiving from the water that they didn't even know about. That had been the water's request, and that had been their promise. And from that moment forth, why, I tell you, it became like a social thing that they would do, like a custom, like a ritual in that place. Yes, every time water was drunken, people would pause, and everybody would know what this meant. They would all pause. And thanks would be given for the water, but also for the blessings that the water brought that nobody knew yet about. Whenever they washed themselves, whenever they cooked, it was the same. Until, as time went by, unseen blessings started to rain down upon them. Blessings that they could not possibly have known about in advance, and yet they knew had come to them from the water itself. They somehow just knew, and they would give more thanks for these blessings and for the blessings still to come they did not know about. And on it went. It went on and on like this. For each new blessings that came, why, there would be more gratitude and more gratitude for what yet was still to come. And for some people, why? They found themselves filled with inspiration. Other people filled with love. Other people filled with a desire to help others. The entire village seemed to be rising on a tide of thankfulness and blessing, and yet more thankfulness. And I was there. I was, said the baker. Wait, what? Said the shoemaker. You were there? Yes, I was, said the baker. I was lost. I'd been walking in the mountains and lost my way. I came upon that place like it was a fairy tale, like a place you don't normally find, but I did find it. And when I met the people there, when I spoke to them, when I heard their story, I was overwhelmed. I'd never seen people like that, so filled with gratitude, nor had I ever seen such a blessed place, like heaven on earth. It was like heaven on earth. I liked it so much that I stayed with them for months and months, and I learned a new trade. A new trade, said the shoemaker. What did you learn? Why, baking, of course, said the baker. I learned to be a baker. And now, whenever I bake the bread, I give thanks that I have the strength in my arms, that I have the flour in my cupboard, that I have the yeast and the water, especially the water. And I give thanks for all of it, but not just that. I give thanks for the blessings that I do not know about that come to me from making the bread, and that come to my customers for eating the bread, the blessings that we do not yet know about. And the shoemaker, he had to bring himself to at the end of this story. He had to bring himself to. And he said, thank you very much. And he went back to his workshop. And he started immediately. He started immediately getting together all that he needed, all the material for the most enormous soles you ever saw. All the leather for the uppers. All the thread for the stitches and the shoelaces that were meters and meters long. He got together everything, and he worked every day up early hours, just like the baker, for he had learnt something essential from him. He had learnt the power of devotion, and he became then devoted to the task. And as he worked, why, he'd be grateful that he had them work to do, that he had this work to do, but also grateful for whatever blessings might come, the blessings that he did not know about, the blessings that would come to him and hopefully to others that he did not know about. And he would work, and this gratitude would fill him with zeal until, as the time went by, why, that enormous pair of shoes, it took shape. It started to look like a proper pair of giant shoes. And he would polish the leather, and he would thread the shoelaces until things were just ready. But something had been happening all the time that he'd been making the shoes. Yes, something had been happening all the time that he'd been making the shoes. And that was this sense that there was something big somewhere out there in the world that was coming closer. And he had this feeling that every time he gave thanks for what he did not know was coming, why, that big thing would get closer and closer. Until some days he felt almost like he could feel the giant's breath on his neck. Some days he felt he could just turn around and look out the window and the giant would be there. Until one day, when the shoes are made, when the final polishing has happened, he hears this tapping on the glass, and he turns around, and what does he see there? He sees a giant fingertip tapping on the glass. And he goes outside and he looks up, and there's this enormous giant. And the giant says, "I believe you've got my shoes." And the shoemaker, he goes inside and he pushes the shoes towards the door, and he opens the doors up as wide as he can. And it's a bit of a squeeze, but the giant pulls them out one by one and he puts them on his feet. And then he reaches down and he takes the shoemaker and he puts him on his shoulders and he walks away into the world. And they walk together for countless eons, for what seems like an endless time. They walk the world endlessly through thousands of years. And all the time he walks, he sees the world with the giant's eyes. He sees the world as the giant sees it. Where you or I might see separation, he sees only unity. Where in his past he might have held judgments about a person that he sees, now he sees them as himself. For a timeless time they walk and walk. Countless eons go past, and still he is clinging to the shoulders of the giant and watching the world through the giant's eyes. And when at last they circle back on themselves and they come back to the very same place where they'd started, and just a few days later than the time that they set off, the giant takes him off his shoulder and he puts him down on the ground. The shoemaker, he says, "Oh, thank you." "No," says the giant, "thank you. I owe you some money. I didn't pay the remainder of the money I owe you for the shoes." The shoemaker says, "You've paid me more than you could ever possibly pay me. You are very welcome. Thank you." The giant just laughs and he walks away. Just laughs and he walks away. And from that moment forth, the shoemaker, whenever he made shoes, he would make them with deep gratitude for the work he'd received, for the vision he'd received, of knowing that whoever walked in those shoes, he walked with them too. And all their days before and after, he walked with them. He gave thanks for this, but more than this, he gave thanks for whatever blessings may come, both before and after, from this pair of shoes. And I was there. I showed up at his house. I did. I was looking for a story. I'm always looking for a story. I showed up at his workshop and I said, "Do you have a pair of stories for me? I mean, shoes." And he just laughed. And he said, "Oh, you're the storyteller. I've been waiting for you." And he pulled the shoes off the shelf and he gave them to me. And I swear, when I put those shoes on and I walked out into the world, why? Stories couldn't stop coming out of my mouth. So that's the story. If you've any comments, you can put them in the chat box. And I wanna just say a few words about that. There's a few things about that story that I particularly like, that have stayed with me ever since. I have actually, in the last few weeks, I start and end my day like that. I light a candle on my desk. I don't know if I'll do this forever, but like for now, this is what I'm doing. I light a candle in the morning and I say, thank you for the blessings that will come that I know about, that I become aware of. And thank you for the blessings that come that I'm not going to be aware of. And I do the same in the evening. I just love it. I find it the most wonderful advice. The giant too, the image of the giant has been something that I've really loved just living with for a bit. It's like all of us have received a commission for a pair of shoes that's far bigger than we currently fit into. And our task is to make that pair of shoes, and to do so with devotion and with an expectancy of what will come, even though we don't know what it is now. I just love the symbolism of that. And there's also something in there that I very much like that for me pertains to spiritual practice. I think it's quite a key thing, not just to be devoted, that's obvious, I would say, but also this thing of gratitude for what you don't yet know of, gratitude for what comes to you. There's a subtle point in there that I particularly like, which is that when we engage in any spiritual practice, there's always a temptation to want to have the good experiences that we've had before, like, oh, that time was blissful or lovely. I want that one again. And it's a subtle thing to steer the experience that way. What this story reminds us is you can't receive the blessings of the next level of consciousness from the level that you're at right now. So the extent to which you seek to condition the experience that you're having right now according to what you've known will limit your availability to the blessings that are coming to you next. I find that a very satisfying point, and I like very much the reminder. All right. So thank you very much for watching. If you're watching the replay, thank you very much for being with me too in another way. I will be doing these regularly. So if you'd like to hear more about them, you can sign up to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find out more about my work at Stories of the Journey Home. There you'll find more stories, intuitive stories, also training and other intuitive storytelling services. So thank you very much for watching. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.